Так, можу тоді починати. 8:05, трошки почекали, щоб там усі встигли доєднатися. Я паралельно ще буду залучати там інших студентів. Паралельно у нас ще йде реєстрація. Можна звертатися в наш бот, IPT Help Bot, аби доєднатися зараз. Мене звати Михайло, я представляю студентську раду НН ФТІ. Ми запросили Олександра Бажанюка, аби він нам розповів про наше майбутнє, як би дивно це не звучало, та перспективи в IT. Можливо, саме ця лекція допоможе вам визначитись з подальшими своїми кроками у кар'єрі. Якщо будуть виникати питання до лектора, пишіть в чат, прохання не спамити, бо будемо видаляти. Дякую всім, хто прийшов, і окремо дякую від імені всіх студентів НН ФТІ Олександру за те, що погодився і виділив свій дорогоцінний час. Олександре, дякуємо. Ваше слово.
Добрий ранок. Я буду розмовляти англійською мовою. Якщо є питання, можна перервати. У мене буде в anytime. If you want to make a recording, that's also fine. Yeah, I'm sorry that I switched it in English. It's just my vocabulary, very powerful in English and not so powerful in Ukrainian. Historically, it's a historic things. There's like a huge title for this lecture today is kind of future and how to build career in the future. There's a lot of things I wanted to cover. I've put like outline for 4 pages. If I will have a time and you will find it useful, I will probably try to go through that and give my opinion here and there. If you like this lecture and the time will be over, then we can schedule another one. I think it's definitely possible. If you wanted to make a recording of this session, that's also fine for me. So I will not tell any super secret information. Most of the things which I will talk about will be related to my experience and related to advices which I almost given to anyone who asked me for advices. So nothing special will be here. And I wanted to start with, in a second I will tell about my story and how I came where I came and where I came and a lot of details about that. But I wanted to start with the simple thing, which is basically 4 years ago, when like there was still questions about career in the future, and there still was people basically building the careers, building the businesses, growing the opportunities, growing themselves, and no one really expected the things which happened later, like a pandemic and then economic recession and then the war in Ukraine happens. No one really, I mean, maybe some smart people predicted a lot of these events, but majority of the population was not ready for that. And it's good to be prepared for various different scenarios, but realistically speaking, we really don't know how the market will turn around and will be next year and more jobs in cybersecurity or less jobs. So we try to kind of build a strategy around like our own contribution to the society and to the industry in a way that no matter of where you are and what kind of events happened, you kind of a little bit more ready than you was. And truly speaking, and that's kind of starting from my end, I was not ready for many of these. I was not ready for the pandemic. I was not ready for the recession. And it sounds maybe ridiculous for some of you, but even for the war, I was not ready to get it. Like 1 hour before the war started, one of my very close friends called to me and told, hey, the war will start. You have to evacuate your family from Kyiv. We have a couple employees in Ukraine. You have to do something. And I couldn't believe on that. And I say, hey, you should remove your paranoia. And you should, and we will have a chat tomorrow, but I will not do anything today. So I was wrong. Obviously, I was wrong, not once, many times, which is saying that kind of I'm a human and can make a mistake. So some of my advices and some of my story you will find probably interesting and important for you. Some of it may be less interesting or less relevant, less important. That's all kind of part of everyone every person kind of have this experience of failures, error, mistakes, and so on. So that just kind of started. And one more thing is basically, I'm glad that I can speak to you this day, and I really kind of wanted to give you some of my perspective. It's less about like giving you an education on specific knowledge, or kind of test you on who is the smartest guy in the room. It's nothing about that. It's really about like, how can I share what I kind of went from the last 15, 16 years in a way that it can be useful for you and you can basically get it. I'm pretty sure that many of you is much smarter than me and basically much younger and adapt fast and do a lot of things. And again, because of the war, the mind transition, the level of adaptation for the environment is much higher you have than I've probably have. So you kind of could go in from a very dark time to use it as an opportunities to the time where you will be successful and you build like successful companies, or you be part of the government, or you will be part on the like science or art or something like that. And I will try to give you again my perspective of all of this is kind of possible. You have infinite amount of opportunities now, and everything is on you. Even though the world is complex and there's so many challenges, the time we live in right now is the most interesting time and the most fruitful for the opportunities. So that's where I try to have this conversation with you about this. And in order to understand like how you can see me, how you can understand me better, I wanted to give like a short story from myself, where I came and where and what I've got right now. So I finished FTE in 2010 in a major of cybersecurity. It's cyber of information security. It's cybersecurity basically. And when I was studied in university, I got a couple jobs, and I think now it's very common when you basically getting your job slightly earlier than you finish university. I used to work as a sysadmin, and now it's basically all about DevOps, and like people DevOps call them sysadmins, but back in the days there was old style sysadmin thing. And then I become a developer of C++. I kind of I think I'm still pretty bad developer from going through many years. It doesn't really bother me. It's not really stopping my career. I just choose slightly different paths. But that basically was early days. So like get some experience of as a sysadmin and developer. And then as soon as I finished education in FTE, I basically definitely see the gap. First of all, the industry at that time was slightly different. There was not as many open positions for cybersecurity. So I found, and I really, really want to work in cybersecurity. So I have a strange ideas here and there, and I so like in mathematics and physics, and my heart was always with quantum computing and everything like this. Nowadays, it's this area has much more jobs and much more opportunities. Back at that date, most of the job was focused on sysadmin and development, and actually was pretty linear work on outsourced company. So it was kind of in the beginning of the era of kind of software development, and I would say, and even beginning of the like a real era of software development. There was software development, but if you think about like agile and like a complex problem and how they solve that problem, it's actually started from roughly from 2000, and we still have a huge path to learn about what does mean to be a good engineer and what does mean engineering practices. Apparently, you will realize that it's not a lot about code, it's a lot about people, communication, collaboration, architecture, templates, methods, and things which is basically much more powerful for you before you even start writing the code. But putting this aside for a second, coming back to my 2010, so basically I wanted to become cybersecurity expert like hard. And I wanted to like sacrifice if needed, but kind of become a cybersecurity expert. And I joined a startup. So, and we will talk about startups today. I hope we will talk about this for some time. But the idea is that some of the companies, they are small, but they expected to be big. And that companies is not expected to be, it's expected that the startup will build some stuff and will be some grow. It could be grow from the revenue, it could be grow from the number of employees, investments, anything. So, but the nice part about startups, it's a very, very interesting environment where there's no room to be lazy. There is no room to, if you're not adapting, you out. If you're lazy, you out. If you doesn't support mission, you out. So basically you have to be super strong, and you have to be mentally super strong, emotionally super strong, done a lot of work, easy to change priorities, easy to adapt, a lot of things. That was my first startup, and I've learned quite a lot. So with 1 year and a half in that startup, I've learned more than for 6 years in the university, like 2 or 3 times. That was kind of fun time. Many nights and many weekends was spent in there. Apparently, finally that startup failed, so it was not successful. Although for me it was successful because I was basically got maximum as possible for that startup. But as a startup, as the business, it was not went real at that time. And then when I basically was working on that startup, we basically tried to build automation to find vulnerabilities in the binaries. And that's a huge problem, and it's still a huge problem. It's still very hard to resolve that problem. But back at that in 2010, it was like unbelievably complex, and there was kind of too early to basically believe that we can make it with that small of the team and that years. But anyway, I still use it for the very good use of my time, and I start communicating with a lot of open source projects because of my work, because what I was done. And one of the projects was in Berkeley University. And Berkeley University basically has the BitBlaze project, which was basically at that day was like in the binary analysis reverse engineering, it was like SpaceX type of the project. This was like there's a dream team people doing like a very, very interesting and important work. Again, that time nowadays that project also that. So, but that time was kind of amazingly nice project. And when I communicated with the professor there, she basically find my energy and my level of engagement pretty fascinating, and she decided, okay, I have a money, I'm hiring researchers here and there, let me hire Alex. And then she gave me the contract for almost 2 years to join the Berkeley University for that work. I was not studying Berkeley, I was actually working at Berkeley University in a lab. So sometimes it happens if professor has the budget, she can just hire. The salary is there, it's kind of small, but the amount of experience you will get is tremendous. So I joined Berkeley University, and there was a lot of stories there as well. So the lab where I was working on, there's 3 startups came up from that lab. So meaning that I worked with the future founders of the startups back at that days. Now they become a very, very rich and very powerful people with build a good companies here and there. So that kind of was very interesting. But not just that. From the same lab, we got, I think, 3 or 4 professors in different universities, Michigan University and some other university. So that was kind of a very strong team. And again, we was working very hard, and there was a lot of fun. Definitely, Berkeley opened me up a lot of doors, and Berkeley gave me a lot of perspective. What does real open mind mean? What does real work mean? Real projects, deliverables, like a lot of things, which is you kind of know this, but you have to feel it. You have to live this. So that basically was kind of that years. And then my contract was ending, and then I supposed to back home, but at that time I already kind of got the idea of like what is United States is, what is like a West, and here what's going on around me, like universities, industry, things like that. And then I moved to Intel Corporation, where I basically start working with another very interesting group of folks, but related a lot about device security, hardware security, firmware security, hypervisor security, all of this low-level aspect, system code aspect job. And that was amazing 5 years there. So I basically learned cyber a lot. I basically was engaged in roughly 70 different projects, and basically we was doing really fascinating work like hackathons and open source project and open source training. You can find them in GitHub. Open source training is like 700 slides of very good content about how does the hardware firmware work. They're still irrelevant, so it's actually I still using some of that slides even these days, although it was like 7 years ago when we released them. So that went well, and then that was the time when we started the advanced threat research team within the Intel, and then when Intel sold out McAfee to the private equity firm, we basically was moving with that McAfee organization, and we was basically part of that advanced threat research team, which done a bunch of research. So we published a lot of research. You can Google my name from the conferences like Black Hat and DEF CON and Recon and Troopers, and like I think in 1 year I was done like 5 to 10 different conferences. That was kind of a peak of my research career. So I was basically a security researcher in my heart for many years, and done a bunch of that research. Very interesting research, some of that very fundamental research, which generates entire wave of technologies, an entire wave of big discussions. I was part of TDT team, which is create one of the technology Intel released a couple of years ago. I was reviewing a bunch of technology from Intel, from CPU to microcode to ME to a lot of interesting stuff. So, and then when we was basically in Intel, Yuri, he is my co-founder for my current company, and we was basically discussing about starting another company, a new company. And in 2017, we started a new company focused on supply chain security for the system code, for the firmware, hardware, devices, hypervisors, drivers, operation system, things like that. And we're sort of successful. We started the company in 2017. We get the first round of investment from Andreessen Horowitz. It's a very famous investor in the world. Mark Andreessen was one of the founder of internet, so like a lot of things from early browser type of development came from him and his company early days. He was like a star of 90s, like Elon Musk of 90s or Steve Jobs of 90s, this kind of a person. And then we basically make a B with Madrona Capital and make A with Madrona Capital and Series B with 1011. These names is not giving you much, but basically other very interesting and important investors who basically in total invested in our company $50 million. We grew the team to 85 people. These days we have a lot of progress done, a lot of good technology built. And that gave me a lot of perspective how to build from 0 to 1, how to build the company from no employees to almost 100 employees, and kind of with the very complex environment with the cybersecurity over the time of the pandemic and the recession and everything. Basically, that was kind of in a short my career path. So then you kind of know now a little bit about me, and you can basically ask me questions with regard on that. So the interesting part basically was last year, and you guys kind of get a lot of in the last year changes in your life and challenges and completely life changes. For me, it was not the same, but I also got through the level of transformation. My family was still in Kiev at that time. But that's not the only event which happens in the last year with me. It's also, there was also like I was rethinking about like the concepts of the life, the concepts of what I'm doing, why I'm doing, and a lot of things basically fundamental, because like the level of stress and unpredictability at that time was that high that I was rethinking about stuff. And that basically led me to get a new discipline to on board. So I kind of start listening philosophers and got to know some of that concepts there, which I found very powerful. Definitely recommending you to listen Andrei Baumeister. He's Ukrainian philosopher. I think he's pretty good. I think he helped me to figure out a big concept like how does the world work, which is very important. There's a bunch of other philosophers. I think one of the eye-opening one was Jordan Peterson. It's another philosopher. It's another very good way to understand the big picture thing. We will talk about details like tactics and hires and how to pass an interview, but I wanted to give you some of the things which will help you on the building big picture as well. And the way I came to this kind of philosophy, it was actually a very complex path. I was a fan of physics and math, and I didn't like any other majors like literature or history or philosophy. And then over years I become more interested on discipline like economy, and then history, and then even psychology. Like when I started my company, I realized that to have a very good understanding of psychology and practices and everything, it's so important when you basically build in a company, because it's about team, it's about people, it's about how you collaborate and communicate with them. So basically that led me even to that. But beyond that, if you will talk to me like I think 3 years ago, you basically say, hey Alex, what do you think about philosophy? And I would say, hey, that's kind of a bullshit. It's not real science. It's like just people talk about random stuff. Now I changed completely my opinion. So, and it's happens with me like 4 times when I changed opinion, 180 degree about very important target, and now I am kind of get to that point, which is kind of very interesting for me. And I will not go to that deep, but take a look on this philosopher. They really try to explain the complexity on the world and how to approach that. I will go from my own experience more, and we will maybe come back if you would be interested on that side. So coming back to my experience, let's start maybe with a couple stories there. These stories like was showing me again where I was wrong and why I was wrong and what I could do differently. So one of the story is from the Berkeley University, and one of the startup actually from that lab by which I was is basically manless security. So and the guy who actually built the real first prototype for that company was literally sitting behind me, and he was not an expert on exploits. But I was an expert on exploits, and I was basically building exploits and doing exploits for a couple of years before that. And the idea they built was basically the browser isolation idea. So the idea is basically you have a browser, an exploit could compromise your laptop or your device through the browser when it triggers when they trigger vulnerability and basically run the payload. And then I knew how does this work, and if you're interested, you should learn that. But the idea they have is basically split the browser to the part where the V8 processing will be done in server, and the rendering will be done on a thin client on a laptop. In a way that the real code, which is parsing JavaScript, not really running on your device, running somewhere in the cloud. Which I thought that it's a shit idea, because like you just like when you will study cyber, or if you study cyber, you would know that there's some fundamental concepts, and complex system has complex problems, and if you're removing certain functionality putting them somewhere outside. It doesn't mean you make them secure. You just basically delegate it or split it the responsibility between where it was to where it is right now. And I told him, hey, doesn't really matter where you render v8 code. Exploit will still be triggered and still can basically run the payload there. Yeah, it will take one extra step to attacker to exploit, but it's not worth to implement. I apparently was wrong. So, and I was not wrong from the technical perspective. From the technical perspective, I was kind of right, but from the business perspective, because although, yes, you can basically remove the risk from here to there, or move the risk from here to there, the business implication is much different. So the business implication that if the risk is there, it's not your risk, then you're basically removing your risk. And the value of using this product is pretty high. And then this company becomes successful, 100 million ARR, $1 billion valuation or $2 billion valuation. A very nice story of success, and they kind of fly into the moon and everything. But yeah, for my personal, I didn't see that opportunity. I didn't see it's coming. I didn't see that the business will basically react on the technology this way. So that's kind of showed me a lot about kind of if you know too narrow, you don't see it. You need to basically have this ability to zoom in and zoom out, how to see the big picture, how to see from the different angles, versus just to be too focused on the technology you're dealing with. So that was the one story there which I wanted to share with you. There was a couple more before we'll jump to something like more tactical material. Maybe I can spend a couple more minutes to tell another story. So the story was about software-defined networking. So I used to work as a sysadmin, I've told you, back in university. And then there was one task which we got, it was VoIP traffic, video over IP traffic. And I was extremely surprised that when we built the configuration of that VoIP devices, that some of the software doing better job than the hardware. So basically, you just buying like Intel CPU with the good cache and good memory stuff, and then even that days you kind of create a pretty good driver to render everything back and forth, and it's doing a very good job. Not some beat some hardware on the field, like much better than hardware on the field. And I was kind of surprised that, wow, you wouldn't expect that special hardware, which costs like 15 to 20 times more, doing worse job than like VoIP software, like Asterisk or whatever at the time. And then interesting studies technically. About 7 years later, I saw that there was a bunch of company who literally focused on repurposing general purpose hardware to the special tasks in the networking space where all of the software-defined networking came up. At that time when I used to work there was no such thing. It's just kind of born up at that days. And a lot of people get companies, including one of my VC, with that space. And again, I saw the technology, I saw the result of the test. And again, it didn't resonate for me that it's not just result of the test, it's actually the huge opportunity here to basically utilize this for the broader market perspective, for the kind of industry perspective. So that was another story. The last one, I think, will be about current company, which is I'm running now. And there was so many of them, but I will probably choose one or two very quick one. So when we started the company, the supply chain market was not exist at that moment. And basically, we kind of liked that market because we have an expertise in that market, but it didn't exist. People doesn't pay money there. People doesn't understand how to buy, and people doesn't understand what to do with that tech. And that's because of that, we decide, okay, we will build some things which is a normal cybersecurity companies doing, like detection and response and prevention or whatever. So use the normal language, nothing like that. And then I've designed a couple features there, and that feature was ugly. That features was very ugly, like everyone, like many people doesn't understand why I've designed that features, like the feature of inventory or like vendor catalog or something like this. It's not really material what was the feature was, but the idea was that there were some features I designed in my mind. 5 years later, when we actually see the supply chain market growing, we come back to that feature and figure out that that feature represents a very good use case in that market which we was thinking about initially, but we didn't target it. And I even didn't recognize myself that the way I'm thinking about these features is about that market. And then when I realized it, I think I was basically surprised that even 5 years ago, I have certain things in my mind which is reflecting current need for the customers. There's a couple studies you can get it here. First of all, again, zoom in, zoom out, big picture, small picture. What does it mean? What do you do? Why do you do this? How this will impact the world? So that's the first study which we got. But there was another also study there, is basically the concept of to be too early. I will probably mention this concept when we will talk about evangelizers and entrepreneurs, which is basically like all people who build new stuff. But to be too early is basically when you wanted to do certain things, but there is no clear path to do that, and there is so much resistance at this moment on the time, then you have much higher time to succeed. So you much have higher probability to fail. So what does it mean is basically, let's say, like, if you like will study later on like green energy, which you see now in Europe, it's not the first wave of green energy technology. It's actually the second one. The first one was in early 90, mid 90. It was tremendously failed, by the way. That's why like many investors are very nervous when they basically need to invest in green energy, but that's basically saying too early. Like it's too early. It's too early to figure out that it's ready. It still could be like, it's still kind of cooking. It's still kind of going there. It's still like neither in academia space or it's an industry they're still not ready. So let's say you build something in academia, but in order to make your invention to work, there should be another 3 inventions. That's where it's too early, because your dependencies, which you're relying on, it's not exist yet. If it's high probability that it will exist, you're in the right path, but you are too early. If you try to sell, let's say, supply chain security, as we tried to sell it like in 2017, you're too early. Supply chain was not a thing there. People doing supply chain as the questionnaire, as the thing which is like a compliance paperwork versus a real work. And there was no one known how to pay, no one known how to deploy. So that doesn't exist. People talk about, oh, there's a problem, supply chain security. Oh, there's another problem, like we cannot fly to the moon every day, and there's another problem, we will die at some day. So there's so many problems. We don't know which of the problem we are ready to resolve now, and who is ready to resolve them, and how. And some of the people can turn this around and saying, I don't care if it's too early, I still would make it. But this type of people, like Elon Musk type of people, they kind of moving against everyone. They move in and they're doing the changes. I will not talk about like that type of movements. I think it's not necessarily important, because I'm not that person, and there's no secret sauce there, which is anyone can teach you. You need to be just obsessed and be persistent and do a bunch of stuff, and there should be some luck. Anyway, that's not my area where I'm the strongest. It's probably more philosophical psychology discussion there. I will focus on kind of a normal person, like what can be done by anyone. So that would be a majority of my talk. And I know you're still kind of keeping attention to what I'm saying, so I wanted to start with something which is I don't want to forget. In November last year, a very huge event happened in the entire world. The event of the caliber of the new iPhone or the time of the internet creation, it basically was the ChatGPT moment. So some of you who didn't track that project for the long, it was fascinating project, and I can talk about this for long. I've tracked this project for many years and getting to know some people who was basically launching this project and others. But let's put this aside in case if there would be some interest there. Let's just quickly touch on that. So ChatGPT is basically, if you don't hear and didn't use, absolutely should try. This is the thing which is unavoidably be part of our life. Do you want it or not? And that's unavoidably things which is like everyone would some way or another will basically be engaged, the same like a phone or internet or whatever. But for some of you who basically is not as familiar with this, is general purpose machine learning artificial intelligence bot, which is basically quite good on general purpose discussions. And it's not just that, it's also have a bunch of self-education things, open API, open plugins, open source projects like Llama and Alpaca, which is giving you to run this stuff on your laptop. Definitely recommend you to try. I've tried. It's very interesting. It's fascinating results. It's actually will change in the next 20 years. A lot of things, how we do what we do, and the job market as well. So for my opinion, I think with the ChatGPT and the future technology on this direction, there would be tremendous changes. So if I would say in one sentence, what would be the difference? The knowledge will not become the multiplier of your salary. So today, as more knowledge as you can accumulate, as better your salary will be, and especially if you can interpret that knowledge, especially. But even with the good knowledge base, you can basically ask for pretty high salary. I think that will not be the case in the future. I think knowledge will not be the multiplier for your salary for the job market. The reason is that because any knowledge can be extracted very quickly, reinterpreted very quickly, and retrain it or done a bunch of stuff in that direction very quickly. So what I'm thinking will happen is basically the job will be about collaboration, communication, brainstorming, strategy, ideas, methods, concepts, approaches. Ownership, delivery, cross-function, cross-companies, cross-nation collaboration, things like that. So that would be, I think, the future of the job from the high technology, from the technology perspective. When there is a lot of job will be automated or semi-automated with the tools. You will have, as you're using today Excel to do some calculation, you will use the same thing to basically create a code, run the papers, and many other things. So there's a couple formulas I have in my mind today. I think I'm truly a believer on work in person. This remote work is not given enough in-person collaboration, and I'm a big fan of this kind of being in the same office, in the same room, and work late hours, and make sure that the things will work in a way you guys agreed on. And I think that will be even more. I think this remote work, which we got in the last 10 years, everyone was getting remote, will become to the point where ChatGPT will replace almost all of that remote work, because the remote work is most of the linear work. You know inputs, you know outputs, you fill details in the between. And basically, and the second is that if your job is paid less than $35 per hour, which is like average salary for, I would say, junior level, mid-level developer in the US, your work will be obsolete as well, because again, there's a Copilot. If you didn't test Copilot, it's a nice way to basically code with the ChatGPT type of assistant. Definitely recommend you to try a lot of good stuff there. So that work will be also obsolete, meaning that in the one hand, it's kind of scary, but on the other hand, it's a lot of opportunities, a lot of interesting stuff going on, and you don't need to in the future will do like things which can be automated, but in another hand, you would have to tell what should be automated, how that should be used, how this should be read by other people, and what other people need, and there's a lot of real challenges we need to resolve, and especially not in technology sector. Like technology, it's some of the way to think about technology is basically technology for technology. Like it's a lot about like how technology was built for technology. But if you go to the real life and like see constructions or see like farming, there's a lot of technologies needed there, and not a lot of people wanted to reapply this real technology to the real life, or new technology to the like real life.
Technology,
So that's another kind of area which is, I think, in future will be very demanding. So that was kind of my I would say things which is kind of introduction, even before I start going to some of the tactical discussion. But I hope that was giving you at least some of the perspective, so then the rest will be easier to consume, although it will be much more tactical than what I was saying before. So when you're basically choosing your career, you basically need to figure out how do you want to balance your academia path with your industry path. You can stay in academia forever, but just keep in mind, academia has its own objectives. And in many cases, that objectives is not really industry objectives. It could be things which is like looking forward for 50 years, 20 years, or building research because of certain political decisions, or things like that. So academia has its own objectives. It's not driven by real market. And because it's not really driven by real market, it has the good things and the bad things. So in my career, I stayed until master's degree. I started my PhD, but I dropped it in the first year. And I think it was the maximum I could handle in my life from the academia perspective. Some people stay longer. In the US and in the West, in Europe, many people actually finish the career in bachelor. Because the way it's structured in the US is then when you finish the bachelor, you can commit to master's degree of 2 years or PhD of 5 years. But basically, you make the decision when you finish in the bachelor, which is much better for you, because in many cases, people, first of all, could commit to PhD much earlier than they finish in masters. But second is that that's a kind of a major milestone when people are thinking about kind of, okay, what really should I do? And I'm thinking that many people decide to kind of finish up on the bachelor, and they not really having any problems on that. There could be some complexity if you wanted to apply for H-1B visa. So if you have a master's degree, you have a higher chance to get the kind of the higher tier and probabilities to get that visa. But other than that, I think if you don't really target into kind of utilize your master's degree on a special way, I never heard in the last 10 years that someone saying, oh, you didn't have a master's degree, you're not qualified for this type of the work. I mean, there's still kind of government here and there. They try to keep these requirements, but realistically speaking, it's all on you. And I think for my personal opinion, maybe it's not a popular opinion, I think as early you start taking responsibility for your decisions, as better it is. And staying to master's degree, it's kind of safe choice. It's a home run. But if you decide to take responsibility from your life that early, it's kind of stressful. It's additional risk and additional work. And especially before you're 22, I think 22 is the time when you're really kind of almost ready to take off. If you're doing it slightly early, you kind of take an additional risk and additional kind of work, but on the other hand, it could give you some reward. So think about like where you wanted to go. Do you want to go to the master's degree, or you kind of ready to take responsibility for your future and just go and do like industry type of work and things like that. Something which is I noticed also, that in academia in the US, there's like a point system, and people going much less on lectures than I remember I was going. I remember that we have a lot of lectures. It's almost was impossible to attend all of them. And basically in US, it's literally like 3 times less lectures. But there's much more homework. So, and the homework is unavoidable. So if like I remember in my days, the cheating was not an embarrassing part. You can basically ask help and get the code and like things like that. I would recommend you to try to mentally not cheat, or build the habits of not cheating, because a real money, real market, really like honesty, and cheating is very bad in general. So I recommend you to not you want and learn as many things as you want, and be really easy to move and flexible. But keep in mind, every time when you're doing that jumps, you will start from the beginning. So which is at some point you will figure out that you don't want to jump anymore and you wanted to stay. So be smart about this. Do not do this late, so then you don't want to switch your careers when you kind of arrive into 30s or 35. You wanted to find some path, and you probably wanted to find something like more generic, which is will give you the opportunities to expand, will give you the opportunities to think outside of the box, outside of where you basically was working, was studying before or working before. So one of the things which is I definitely recommend you to study at top universities. There's a bunch of stuff going on from online and offline, and they release a bunch of stuff, Stanford, Berkeley. Like, it's so much information. It's not that there's a problem to get information. These days it's a lot of there. And also take a look and see what kind of programs university has. And there's a lot of grants, and there's a lot of programs where you can get real collaboration and real kind of touch to kind of US and European institutes, and that could give you acceleration even during your early career within the university. I was not paying attention enough at that time on this category, but some of the people who done was getting amazing internship in Canada, in Montreal. They have a very nice quantum mechanic facilities and the department there. So there's a lot of open doors. The amount of open doors is more than we can expect. There are open doors. So that's about academia part. I mean, I can talk about academia long, because I used to work in Berkeley. I was helping the professor in Berkeley there, and I was once in a year, or sometimes more and sometimes less, I'm speaking to FTE folks like you. I'm speaking with other people in Ukraine, like Elin, Kolya Elin, and many others. So I like academia. I can speak about academia forever, but I don't think it's useful for you. I think more, let's switch slightly to industry and spend the rest of the time talking about industry, and how can you basically find yourself in industry, and where you can basically look there. Couple things there. Definitely choose what you're interested in. It's impossible to do many years career with stuff which is you're not interested. You have to be obsessed. You have to like it. You have to discuss with your wife, with your girl, with your friends, what you're doing, why you're doing this. If you didn't find that, that's okay. Take time, explore in different areas, but stay where you will believe that, oh my God, I want to be part of this. In 20 years, this technology will be the most important. Or in 20 years, this thing which will be amazing, and I wanted to be part of that. Let me start studying this. Let me start thinking about this. And there's a lot of opportunities. Again, when you basically, like when I was in university, we was making jokes like, don't Google your ideas, because you will be disappointed. So that's kind of funny because now I think it's not really matter, even if the idea is there. So the way you're thinking about the approaches, the big picture, and the way you would can execute, and the way can you transform the reality and the world with your technology, it's so big. So even if the idea is known, even if someone implement the idea, it's still kind of a huge area to disruption, huge area to bring the new technology. Like, think about this for a second. Like 9 months ago, or even okay, 6 months ago, before ChatGPT came, no one really believed that the Google main business of searching will be under any risk. It was sustainable business, $100 billion business, like 7,000 engineers working to make it business safe. And I was myself, like 6 months ago, I was talking to my friend and saying, hey, I see different technology coming, but the Google is kind of will be hard to basically change and disrupt that technology. Here's what happened. ChatGPT came. Now everyone understand that Google days is over. They become like an Intel type of a company or AMD type of a company when they cannot anymore innovate in the way that they innovated initially. So it doesn't really matter on ideas. It's much more matter on your vision, on execution. How would you paint a picture in the future? And there's so much technology could be done around the humans, like philosophy and psychology aspects, like human-to-human interfaces, human-to-human ways to deliver like things between, like all of this technology it's not yet arrived, and you can basically point to any industry, and if you're kind of looking for kind of rosy picture, but it's not really rosy picture, it's like what is lacking here, you will see that there's a tremendous opportunity even in the area exactly where you think is already over of the innovation. Again, coming back to Google, search engine type of a thing, it's existed like 20 years. And 20 years ago, you use that search, you put this kind of question on a search engine, and you got a result, and you got it like in the early 90s, and you still got it. And it was like, no one, and I was saying like to my friend, hey, like as 9 months ago, Google sucks. If you try to Google like a basic stuff, like how to be a good dad, and you will not find this because there's so much noise, there was so much advertisements there, so then you cannot find that information. And then in one hand, but in another hand, it's a $100 billion business. There's no risk for them. They are the god of that. So you're not really kind of replacing the god on, like easily, like couple months later, the end of the game, and they cannot kind of come back easily. So that's kind of a story about make sure you're doing interesting stuff, make sure you're part on that, take your goals, take your mind in a way that in the big picture, so that will help you. So there is also things about build versus break. So some of the approaches is around how to build technology, but some of the approaches is around how to break or how to hack or how to bypass or how to think about outside of the box. It's like breaking stuff. And cybersecurity is a lot about actually thinking outside of the box. How to find the unexpected behavior, the thing which is kind of the developer didn't intend to have. So that's kind of cybersecurity, but it's not just cybersecurity. If you will read the book From Zero to One from Peter Thiel, definitely recommend everyone to read. You basically will find that interesting about like if you're thinking about like very high philosophical perspective, it's in the many cases it's about finding secret of assumption, secret of the market, secret of studies, secret of whatever. But in order to find that secret, you have to basically find a way to think outside of the box. So that's kind of a lot about that going on, and you should use this as a tools. Another aspect is basically how to basically go deep versus go broad, or basically learn fast, learn slow. So I was always on a mood when I wanted to learn very fast because I thought that I'm always late. I always late for 1 year, 1 day, 1 week, whatever. I never was on time. And then over the years, I actually found that this is quite a good approach, but other approach is also good. Is also like the people who actually was stay in the same area, do not jump too often, study the same stuff, they could actually be as successful without kind of be kind of always moving and always kind of finding the new stuff and study the new stuff, because the way they was doing this was, instead of basically move fast, they basically was persistent. And persistence is also very, very important. And you can be successful just with persistence. And I kind of, one of my friend, he still stay in Ukraine, and he basically stay in one company 10 years. And then he becomes successful, and he doing very well what he's doing, and he has his own way to do that. So there's approach. So approach of jump fast, move fast, or be persistent. And there is no right one, which is, I can think for you, you need to choose one, and you may switch back and forth between them. You can be a little bit persistent at a certain time, and you can jump back and forth another time. So that's also some things which is basically you need to account. Another thing which is, by the way, I don't know how long the session is supposed to be. I know we kind of 1 hour in. I can stay another 30 minutes, but I don't know how much time you guys have. But I will keep going. Whenever you guys will interrupt me, that would be the end. If you would need to have a follow-up session, we could discuss it separately. So moving slightly forward, when you're approaching the industry, you kind of have zero experience in industry, and it looks very scary, and it looks very kind of, wow, where can I start? Where can I look? It's so many different things. So first of all, people is important, and people is the most important. So in my life, I found, I think, 5 people who believed in me to build my entire career. Just 5, not 10, 20, nothing like that. Just 5 people, and it's your mentors. There's people who see in you a value for them, and they can give a lot in a response. Finding them is not easy, and you're not offering them like anything straight in the face, but you start offering them discussions, interesting discussion, interesting questions, interesting ideas, interesting time, and then you will find them and you will talk to them, and these mentors will help you to build your career. Or find mentors, be focused on understanding that the people is important, and the people makes people successful is highly important. So then you also can take a look on the top conferences. Like conferences is important, is the place where people come together, and there's a lot of mind sharing there. A lot of conferences support the students to join the conferences, like free tickets and stuff. A lot of conferences has the slots where the students has higher chance to be accepted. There's like, just need to Google of DEF CON, Black Hat, RSA, any conference you can think about in your geolocation or any other geolocation. Internship is important, so you can build your career through the internship, starting from there. It's a very important vehicle, and many companies getting interns. Absolutely. Things which is many people utilize. I actually didn't, so it was not my path. My path was through open source project, and yes, through open source projects. So look and find open source project you're interested. Find a project which is popular with many stars. Find a project which was recently created, which was basically resolving the real problem in real life. Start testing this project, running the project. It's not hard to run it. You not even need to modify it. Take a look in the bug fixes, see what people are doing on a pull request and the requests in general, see what issues is open, and then you will basically start learning, do you like it or not, and how much you wanted to go deep. And early days, I actually was starting to study the Linux kernel code, which was basically give me a good perspective of, I wrote my own patches for the Linux kernel, and that was kind of fun time, and give me a good perspective of understanding how does the hardware work, how does the software work, how does, like, can you apply machine learning for predictable scheduling, and many other stuff. So open source is important. Another thing which is important is you can take a look on the different open source and closed source projects or products and try to find vulnerabilities. So one of the way to basically start your career is basically report vulnerabilities to the vendors. When you do this, they will create a CVE, which is basically an index for vulnerability. And they will create an advisory when they will tell this vulnerability found by this person and thank you for his work. It's a huge big deal. If you have CVEs in the popular projects, like I got the CVEs from browser, I got CVEs from, like, I think we found like vulnerabilities in 2G modems for the popular cars like Ford, Nissan Leaf, and BMW. So CVEs makes you feel good, for example, because you contributed to the technology, as well as it's good for resume. It makes your resume strong because you basically done a real contribution to the real industry with a real understanding of cybersecurity. You can do bug bounties. Bug bounties is basically when the company paying people to find vulnerabilities near their own products infrastructure of that companies. It's kind of also powerful tools. You can make your money and build your reputation there. So you start there. So another thing which would be is I mentioned about conferences. There's another aspect of the conferences, which is Kolya Ilyin is big fan, and I was a big fan early days. It's a CTF, capture the flag. You find challenges where basically people are basically getting points, and whoever get highest points is basically become a better player, and best players has a good reputation on resolving certain tasks, which is kind of higher chance to get a job. So you do that. Mock interviews. A lot of people could give you the mock interview, like they can basically emulate interview for you, so that they are donating them time for you. They're saying, you early in your career, you don't know how does the Google do interview, and you have lower chance to get to the Google because they have like 180 people for one seat. But I can give you 1 hour of my time, so then I can interview you in a similar way. So then you practice that. Call it mock interviews. So you always should collect through your life references. References is the people who you're working with, the people who are excited about you, the people who are excited about your work. Because over the time, there would be references like, hey, can your professor talk about you? Can your early employer talk about you? Who can talk about you but not you? So that's a references. It's very important during the life. Make sure that you basically collecting them, and at the time you come, you use them. That's his acceleration point. If you have good references, if even professor, if the professor can literally get a call and in a good English explain that you was an amazing student and you done a bunch of great projects, it's much better than if professor doesn't do that. So that's kind of one thing to know. So one other thing which I forgot to mention is that in education, I think the education through the disciplines, where you kind of have a lot of different disciplines which is somehow connected, but you don't have really kind of comprehensive knowledge about that, will not be a way we will see the education in the future. I think the education of the future will be the education in the future will be around how to resolve the problems, and you will apply as many disciplines as needed, how to build certain technologies, certain use cases, certain things. So where a lot of cross-discipline knowledge will become in play and will become the most useful. Because I remember when I was in FTE, I've studied so many maths, so many physics. Later on, down to my career, I found a lot of them useful. But when I found them useful, I realized that no one really teach me how they could be useful. So that was kind of fun time at that time. So I don't know again how much time do we have, but to close the topic about industry and kind of moving it slightly to kind of the topic of how to become an expert and what kind of good habits to have. The last area which I wanted to share with you is basically when you're approaching the industry, there's 3 categories of the career you can build. And I mentioned a little bit about startup, and again, maybe in a couple of minutes, I will still have time to explain more about startup and entrepreneurship. But yeah, startup is a special stuff. You neither could be very successful and it will shape you very strong, or you will not like it because basically not for everyone, because it's kind of generate extra stress and extra pressure and extra things, but that's something special. Also, you can build a career in a big corporations like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, whatever. That's another type of career. That's career where you basically will work on most of the mindset for you will be on negotiation and risk management area or risk mitigation area, which is fine, which is good. I also work in this environment. Nothing wrong with that environment. It's just your work will not be as tied to the kind of changes for the industry, but more to make sustainability, to make a persistency and sustainability versus agile and flexibility and move fast and break things. So that's kind of a big companies. There's something in the middle. There's something in the middle, which is mid companies, which is not as huge as corporation, but it's bigger than startup. It's actually always hard to find the good mid-level companies, but if you kind of study them well, it's a good career because you can join company as reasonably early, and you can go through the hyper growth or growth phases where the company will grow from 1,000 people to 10,000 people. This is also a very interesting time to be in that company. So it's a middle stage company which is building revolutionary technology in many cases. Definitely recommend you to take a look. So from my prioritization point of view, I think mid-stage company definitely recommended. Startups definitely recommended. The big company, the corporation, also recommended, but I would say from the personal experience point of view, big corporations is a home run. It's a default option. If you have a chance to try something different, I would definitely recommend to try something different. So that was the blog about kind of what companies exist, how to approach your first steps in a career in industry. I have a couple more blogs, but I don't know how much time do you guys have. I don't want to basically make someone worry that you didn't come to some other lecture. So let me know if you want me to keep going another 20 minutes or so, or you wanted to schedule another call. Both options fine for me.
Так, не соромтесь задавати питання лектору. Я думаю, лектор залюбки відповість вам.
Ну, я думаю, ми можемо ще послухати хвилин 20, півгодини. Окей, буде все нормально.
Там в чаті було питання.
Yeah, so do you think about MBA, master's degree for cybersecurity career? So here is the thing. I personally believe about MBA slightly differently than maybe many other people, but I believe MBA is highly important when you already get some experience on some complicated projects, ideally startup type of projects, and then you try to finalize your academia career with MBA by talking to people who also done business but build the mechanics to make business better. I mean, you can go to MBA at any point in the time. 99% MBA programs is not worth your time. There's a couple which is super great. It's like the Stanford MBA program. It's amazing. Yale MBA program is very good. So, but again, first of all, they're super expensive. The one which is good, it's cost like 110 grand per year, which is like insane amount of money for anyone, even in the US. But in any other location, I would basically skip it early and maybe come back if needed, maybe somewhere in between the different projects in the mid of the career. So I think that would be much more productive to do MBA at that time. But again, that's my opinion. Take it or leave it. I am opinionated as anyone, so there's no perfect answer and there's no perfect person. But giving you what I learned from my perspective. Oh, as we have extra 20 minutes, let me quickly check what I didn't tell you yet. So when you're choosing the direction, I've already mentioned that to make sure that it's interesting. use cases and way to expand your ideas. Build your mindset around breaking versus building, so then you know like which of the time you're doing what. Always change, always challenge yourself and be flexible. Agile is important. Look for the market opportunities, like who is arriving to the market, who is building what, like what companies are raising. Always challenge yourself with the most complicated question for your research or for your topic, for your project. So you have to basically target the root cause of the problem as quick as possible. So do not do not think about like all of that mechanic around. Find the most complicated question, like the most hardest question. Why it failed? What is the main need for that thing to happen, and things like that. So general rules to the career success is basically focus on area where you're strong. So do not try to basically always pick up the weak area, because you know people during the life will basically point us to the area where we're weak, where we basically not as strong, because they could be strong there, but you may not be, and you may get an impression then to improve the area where you're weak will make you much stronger in the end. It's kind of not really true, because the really true is if there's an area where you're obsessed about success and obsessed about kind of be good at, and if you're good at, then you can basically be much more successful if you always will try to compete in someone else's field and basically be good at areas which is kind of you're not interested, and that it's not even motivated. So my personal take is basically absolutely be strong and where you're strong already, and work on that part. Definitely recommending a book, Think Fast, Think Slow. Absolutely amazing book. Give you good perspective of a lot of things. Another very important book is CEO Within. Very important book. I definitely recommended that one. And Hard Things About Hard Things. I can give you another 100 book which I found very important, but I think with this kind of 3 or 4, it's a good start. It's a good start, and you will find the rest book from there. So no need to basically spray attention there. Use rule 80-20. 80, try to get 80% of result with 20% on the time. Again, that's kind of coming back about strong and weak part. 80% of your time should be with highest ROI. So then you know that you invested here, and then because you invested here, you will get highest ROI there. So build your knowledge database, like build your ideas. Like I have like a list of the ideas I started like more than 10 years ago. I add in ideas and I removing ideas, I improving ideas. I building my kind of knowledge about like the world, about certain discipline. I building my map on the people. So like these things, when you start building, it's a discipline which will give you very, very good results in the end. Reading is important, and you shouldn't read everything, and you shouldn't read from the beginning to the end. Sometimes you can start from the end, sometimes you can miss. It's not about how much you read, it's about how much you can zoom in and zoom out quickly. And sometimes like I was disconnected from machine learning industry for more than 10 years because that was not my expertise. But when ChatGPT came, I basically came very quickly to that discipline because I have the foundations and I can easily zoom in, zoom out through this discipline, because that's kind of how I built my knowledge there. Super important, communication and collaboration. It sounds simple, it sounds silly, it sounds like, oh, it's like what you're talking to me, I already doing everything, already doing collaboration and communication. In reality, if you can master that, that will give you a huge acceleration in your career, like tremendous acceleration. The most successful people, not the smartest. The most successful people is who can amazingly communicate and collaborate, deliver the message, make teams work in the best performance, provide the vision, make people obsessively believe on the idea that people propagate, and has nothing to do with the real intellect. It's more about like social emotional intellect and intelligence, and a lot about like these kind of habits and style of the work, and collaboration communications is crucial. Agile, I definitely recommend you for seriously to learn what is Agile is. Again, it could be a separate session, and probably best not for me, but for some of the coaches on Agile, I can introduce them to the FTE or to someone who interested. But the idea of the Agile, then you can change 180 degree in a 1 minute, and everyone in the projects will take it easy and will start to do new stuff quickly. So like it's agility. You do changes without any additional stress, and it's like entire philosophy about development, about building the projects, about people thinking, about like, you know, like I've this week I've moved with my mom, and then my mom is basically, she's like old lady, and she used that old Soviet Union mentality, and that she basically like definitely person waterfalls approach. And when she packing, she like to pack like when she's under control and everything is like linear, then we're not parallel in the job. And I basically invited one of my friends who is basically agile coach to help me to do this moving. And then he and we both like this way that we kind of want to move fast and agile and parallel things. And then we literally get fight with my mom because she couldn't kind of get that one. So agility in the mindset is kind of important for the world and for the future, as well as for your normal life. And again, it may not be very good for your mom collaboration and communication with her, but definitely for your career could be somewhat important. Make every day count. So, and make every day count, and believe. Doesn't matter when you start the projects, there's still so many opportunities in the future for that projects. Then the past shouldn't worry you that much. So the past was the past, it was good, it was bad, whatever it happens, you still can make this day count for your life and be successful. Build a team, build a network. So the most important projects done by the team. 6+ people, maybe 6, 7, 5 people, sometimes 3 people. That's the level of the team doing all of that like amazing project. You may think about like, oh, Google is like 100,000 employees, or like Facebook, like 80,000 employees. They must be doing so many stuff, and it's so complicated to reproduce. In reality, if you look inside, there's like a team of 6 done job for one project, team of 6 for another projects, and basically it's a matter of the group of that team, and the matter of like motivation, message, and direction. So think about this when you building the projects, when you building your company, your group, your work environment, how to build a team, how to build your network, which you will use later on to build a team. So you have to think about network from the perspective of who is your mentors, who is your peers, people who you will work with, who you can build this. So that's kind of the important part. There is like everyone build their own framework, like basically kind of how to basically build the right habits, and you can basically build that framework yourself. Like my framework is about like I have values, which is I'm building over my life. I have ideas, and I will use collaboration communication of this in order to make sure that I can implement my ideas and my values. And I am basically using some of the foundations of taking ownership, flexible change on the current environment, and things like that. When you build this framework for yourself and you kind of imagine this in your head, you can go that daily, quickly in the morning or late in the evening, and that will make you discipline around like, okay, here's my goal for the year, here's my goal for the 10 years, here's my goal for this year. And then using this framework, you kind of could basically figure out how tomorrow could be the better day than today. So that's kind of the area about basic stuff, about kind of what would make you very successful. I can speak a little bit about evangelizers and startups. I think it's kind of important. I don't think it will take me a long time, but I think it could be useful for you. Yeah, there's a question here. I can answer before jumping to that.
Okay. As we are talking about the mindset, I would ask, As co-founder of DCUA, you played a lot of CTFs. Did they help you to develop a mindset? If so, then how?
Yeah, I actually skipped that part about DCUA and DEFCON group. There was part on that story as well. CTFs definitely helps. The CTFs definitely helps to get the idea of the teamwork and understand how the team work together. It's hugely important, as well as CTFs give you the perspective of how to break things, and that part on the equation, also responsibilities and kind of be accountable. So like you want to go to make a barbecue over a weekend, or you will need to play with your team on CTF. Hard challenges, very hard challenges. At some day you will decide that probably barbecue would be better for you to recover your brain, but in another day you will see your team lose because you didn't come in the right moment. There's no easy answers. And in many cases, I know probably Aristovich is the guy who many people have different opinion, but I like the guy, and he's saying a lot of interesting stuff. One of the things which he said was about, even when the person making a simple decision about like, do you want to punish your child to not doing the homework, or do you want to let it go, you're really doing a hard decision. So there's no simple decisions. And as better habits you have to build your decision, build your accountability, and work as the team player with the good team, as quicker you will become kind of very solid kind of engineer and build a huge value for the industry through the technology which you will build in the future. So anyway, I think I can give you, I gave you some answer there. So let me jump very quickly on startups and where to start there and what to think about this. One of the concepts on a startup I mentioned a second ago, or not a second ago, like in the beginning, was around too early, like be too early. And that's concept, not the fundamental concept, but very important one. There's a bunch of books about this, like many books. Don't read many of them. One or two would be enough because they kind of repeating the same message on a different source. Not that useful, but couple things which is probably I wanted to say about startup. So first of all, startup is everyone is count. When I'm saying team in startup, it's every single person count. That's very important. The second thing which is important for startup is vision and mission and values. So the people join a startup because they believe in the startups, not because of the money. I mean, money is money. Everyone needs money. So there's no one can say that they don't need money, but it's not the factor. The factor to join startup is that you believe in that startup. And if you don't believe in startup, don't join. You will not enjoy it. You will not enjoy it, and that would be waste of your time and the startup time. You should believe in the vision and the mission, and you should share the values with the founders, with the team. So there could be different cultures, and there could be different values and different mission and visions, and they could be contradicting. That something which worked for Microsoft never would work for Google. Whatever worked for Google never would work for Apple. Whatever worked for Apple never would go for Facebook. So they all kind of build the different things, but based on the values, the different values. So that's kind of important. So always understand this. And we didn't talk to you a lot about like what is the good analogy about startups. And I will give you one. Don't take it too seriously, but there's some sort of truth there. Basically, startups is like you're religious. You have to believe. You have to believe that this company could build technology which in the 5 years be $1 billion company. You have to believe on the vision of the founders. Then we build in like a world-class, the best of the best language model recognition, translation, or drones for the frontliner for Ukraine. You have to believe on this. So that's kind of a key important aspect there. Another very important aspect is research is the key. So research is the tool in our disposal. We can use this tool and doesn't get any result, or we can use this tool and get amazing result. But research is the key. So figuring out how things work, finding that kind of secret sauce. Find this unique intellectual property is the key when you basically partner the startup and you build in startup. The assumption also very important is feedback loop. So it's a very important when you daily knows is what you're doing is really needed and exactly that what you're doing is important. And it's kind of hard in early days in your career because you have longer cycles. You kind of have weeks to check, to read some studies, to think about them. It's very good if you start to switch to the mode of days. What you do today to make you, let's say, be a better, I don't know, cybersecurity expert and get the feedback loop from the real life. It could be open source project, it could be your master thesis, or it could be some other projects you was engaged with. So that one, the very big concept about what is product market fit. I will not go to that deep on that one. It's not super important, but the idea of the product market fit is basically you finding what is needed, which is kind of important because when we study in university and even early in our career, people are telling us what needed. People are giving us all of that like ammunitions. But I'm a big fan of basically you taking responsibility of your decisions and not just your decisions, but also figuring out basically what to do. So I am a big believer on that. If I need to tell you what to do, at some day I probably will replace you with ChatGPT, or at some day I will somehow change you to someone who will not be that directed by me. So meaning that, yes, of course, you need to get the guidelines and directions, and every one of us, and myself included. But if every single day someone needs to tell you what to do, you're doing the wrong job, you're doing the wrong approach. You have to understand that what you're doing is your responsibility, and it's your responsibility to understand basically how this will be used. And when we're telling about startup, the entire idea of startup is basically find things which will be useful, which will be basically needed. In this case, if everyone has this mindset that I will look and understand what exactly need to be done, I will understand why people asking me this way, and next time I will knew that this need to be done without anyone saying to me this. Then this mindset of kind of product market fit is kind of helping not just building companies, but building your career as well. Early adopters is another big concept. You have to basically, early adopters is people, organization, a company who are ready to listen to you about the ideas. Because again, 90% of the people will not ready to hear you because they're in different mindset, they're in different place. They're not ready for you to say how great you can make a drone or how great you can do some certain things. And then early adopters is the people who you're looking for, the people who are ready to hear and listen to you. A lot of books done about different stages on the companies. You can read about this. The important one is persistency. You can go to the startup, but to make startup successful may take 5 years, may take 7 years. You have to understand that you have to believe, because you will need to stay long enough to see that success, because that's the most excited moment when you was invested and you see the success, and that's coming to be true. And then I think the last one will be there's a bunch of business models, and I will not go to them in deep, but there is an enterprise business model when you're selling directly to the enterprises, like big corporations, very similar to what we was discussing. But when you can go to work for the big corporations, you also can basically build a business model as a startup to sell to the big corporation. You can sell it to consumers. Consumers is basically any normal users. We all consumers, we consume technologies. That's a consumer market. And there's also SMB and small and medium business market. So there's a kind of between consumers and enterprises. There's other ways to slice the industries and market. And there's other way to talk about this. There's nothing special there. You just kind of choose what you like and you go there as quick as possible, as deep as possible. I think with this saying, it took me an hour and 40 minutes, almost 40 minutes, 30 minutes, to go through the main message I wanted to say. Many of you probably expected some much more technical lecture from me based on my background. I can do that technical lectures, but I think this lectures is much more important because the way we think and the way we design our life is much more important for success than specific bits and bytes and registers in assembly code or somewhere. If I'm wrong, you can correct me, and next time I could give you some interesting technical lecture, but I think they are less interesting than this one and less useful. Anyway, with this, I can answer the question and wrap up the session. There's a lot of specific and unusual things in cybersecurity. The question is how to find work for them. I'll be seeing a lot of specific fields, researchers doing great things in one area and working in another. Yeah, I mean, life is life. So the thing is that coming back to the entire lecture I've gotten, you have to see from the big picture perspective, zoom out and see how much do you want to invest in certain area? How do you want to understand this? It's not always needed to understand everything. You have to find your way. My way was basically, I can tell you my way. I was obsessed to understand how computer works until I didn't study like assembly and Verilog and microcontrollers, how they work. I couldn't kind of stop thinking about it. I don't understand how this computer works. I couldn't stop thinking about this. And it took me like literally 4 years to get to the point when I could tell, okay, I understand how does it work. I don't need to study that anymore, and I can do something else. And basically, in all of the knowledge I've built around that idea, you can pick or choose any idea, but basically just think about the one which you will be obsessed and what the impact will make it for your life. So that's kind of the main thing. And there's a lot of noise, and there's always noise, and many people try to pretend very important and do very important research, but in reality it's not even incremental research, it's just reshuffling certain information with the smart words. So in many cases it's not worth of your time or anyone's time. Definitely a lot of good stuff going through open source. So see if open source community pick this up. If there's certain research not picking up quickly by open source community or other researchers, is definitely not worth your time. And see and ask yourself who really need it. Does any company really need it? So, but there's no silver bullet. So the one thing which I wanted to say to you is all of these questions you're asking, they are doesn't have like a silver bullet answer. And the best answer I have is basically how to shape yourself in a way that this all questions is not really material for you. You will find answer for them just through the practice and persistent in a certain topics which you would love and enjoy to think about them. Any other questions?
Так, задавайте ще питаннячко.
You definitely can take a look lectures from me from YouTube, and you will find that cybersecurity stuff. And definitely you can take a look at open source training slides. Some of you who wanted to know about hardware and firmware more, CTF's big thing. There's another platform with the trainings. What does they call it? Open source training. I don't remember the Corey. No, Zeno. Zeno is the researcher who now is working on that project. You can find him. That's pretty unique name is Zeno. I forgot his last name, but basically he published a bunch of trainings material these days about cybersecurity, low-level stuff, and things like that. And yeah, definitely top conferences is the way to study, to look at that. And when you first time look at the presentations for the top conferences, you will not understand much. But when you start drilling in, if your goal will be to understand the paper, and you will start drilling in, and that's the interesting area for you, you can in a couple of months you will be there, and then you will be excited that finally you got that. And so, yeah, replicating research, understanding the research from the top conferences could be the way to also accelerate your studies in certain discipline. Any other questions?
Я так розумію, питань вже більше немає. Ви ще щось хотіли додати?
No, that's all good. Thanks for your time. Thanks for staying with me last hour and a half. If anyone has if you guys need more specific advices on specific topics, you can reach me out. We'll figure out time. And I wish you all the best in your future. And if there would be time when we can see in person, definitely remind me, and we definitely could make a chat in one-on-one basis in person at some point on the time in the future.
Супер. Олександре, ще раз вам дуже дякуємо за таку змістовну лекцію, і думаю, що студенти підкреслили для себе щось цікаве, і ця лекція обов'язково допоможе їм в майбутньому. Сподіваюсь, всім було цікаво прослухати лектора саме англійською мовою. Думаю, не треба пояснювати роль англійської мови в галузі IT. Ми цю лекцію записували, трішки згодом опублікуємо записи, надамо посилання, шукайте його там на наших ресурсах. Ресурси в нас і IPT Inst, і студентство НН ФТІ, це телеграм-канал. Підписуйтесь на наші ресурси, в подальшому будемо анонсувати подібні зустрічі з такими цікавими людьми, наприклад, як Олександр був сьогодні. Якщо у вас є ідея, кого саме хочете побачити на наступних лекціях, welcome наш бот, завжди раді, будемо читати, думати, обдумувати. Дуже раді були вас почути. Всім гарного і продуктивного робочого дня. Все буде Україна. Дякуємо.